Hello and welcome back to me reading Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. We are in the last final chapters of this really good book. Less drama, more trauma, maybe? Less like Mrs. Jennings and Catherine de Bourgh and Mr. Collins. Less like fun, petty drama and like a little bit more like you kind of need a mentor in this life and like being poor and then what poor people also complaining about their servants and like the slave trade and how people make their money and like Mrs. Price married for love. But did she? And her sisters plucked Fanny out of this poverty situation, but just Fanny? And let her stay at her uncle's, but they sort of just like pretty much neglected her, kind of, but like neglected her in a rich people way where like she has definitely food and clothing, but they haven't like raised her as their own daughter at all. And maybe they weren't even expected to. It's an interesting book. If you haven't read it, you should. But today I'm going to read chapter 43. Sorry, it's in Roman numerals, and I just really have to like thinking cap. I've got to put my thinking cap on once during this whole time when I do these videos, and it is to read the Roman numerals. Mr. Crawford proposed to Fanny, and she did not like it, and she did not want him, and everybody's like, you don't get it. You're gonna go live back with your family in poverty, and then you'll like Mr. Crawford. Trust me. Trust me, you will. So Mr. Crawford's been trying to get Fanny back, and honestly, he seems like a cool dude. He kind of, I don't know, am I missing something here? Or Jay Knight's gonna be like, Mr. Crawford's the worst, and Fanny doesn't deserve him, or something? I'll have to do some research. Chapter 43. It was presumed that Mr. Crawford was travelling back to London on the morrow, for nothing more was seen of him at Mr. Price's, and after 2 days afterwards. It was a fact ascertained to Fanny by the following letter from his sister, opened and read by her on another account with the most anxious curiosity. Oh my God. I have to inform you, my dearest Fanny, that Henry has been down to Portsmouth to see you, and that he had a delightful walk with you on the dockyard last Saturday, and one still more to be dwelt on the next day on the ramparts, when the balmy air, the sparkling sea, and your sweet looks and conversation were altogether in the most delicious harmony, and afforded sensations which are to raise ecstasy even in retrospect. This, as well as I understand, is to be the substance of my information. He makes me write, but I do not know what else is to be communicated, except this said visit to Portsmouth, and these said 2 walks. These 2 walks. Okay. These 2 said walks. My brain does something weird and switches words all the time, and if anybody knows what that is, let me know. And his introduction to your family, especially to a fair sister of yours, a fine girl of 15, who was of the party on the ramparts, taking her first lesson, I presume, in love. I have not time for writing much, but it would be out of place if I had, for this is to be a mere letter of business, penned for the purpose of conveying necessary information, which could not be delayed without risk of evil. My dear, dear Fanny, if I had you were here, how I would talk to you. You should listen to me till you were tired, and advise me till you were still tired more, but it is impossible to put 100th part of my great mind on paper. It is impossible to put 100th part of my great mind on paper. So I will abstain altogether and leave you to guess what you like. You're writing to me to tell me that something that I've already experienced, but then you're also telling me something that you can't tell me and you want me to guess? What? I have news for you. You have to guess it. I'm writing to you for you to guess what I'm. Okay, wait. But it is impossible to put 100th part of my great mind on paper, so I will abstain altogether and leave you to guess what you like. I have no news for you. You have politics, of course, and it would be too bad to plague you with the names of people and parties to fill up my time. I ought to have sent you an account of your cousin's first party, but I was lazy. And now it is too long ago. Suffice it that everything was just as it ought to be, in a style that any of her connections must have been gratified to witness, and that her own dress and manners did her the greatest credit. My friend Mrs. Fraser is mad for such a house, and it would not make me miserable. I go to Lady Stornoway for after Easter. She seems in high spirits and very happy. I fancy Lord S. is very good-humoured and pleasant in his own family, and I do not think him so very ill-looking as I did. At least one sees many worse. He will not do by the side of your cousin Edmund. He will not do by the side of your cousin Edmund. Of the last mentioned hero, what shall I say? If I avoided his name entirely, it would look suspicious. I will say, then, that we have seen him 2 or 3 times, and that my friends here are very much struck with his gentlemanlike appearance. Mrs. Fraser, no bad judge, declares she knows but 3 men in town who have so good a person, height, and air, and I must confess, when he dined here the other day, there were none to compare him with. There were none to compare with him. And we were a party of 16. Luckily, there is no distinction of dress nowadays to tell tales, but yours affectionately. She said she has no news for you. There's a lot to say. I'm not going to say it all. I can't write a lot, but here's all this stuff. And now she goes on. I had almost forgot. It was Edmund's fault. He gets into my head more than does me good. One very material thing I had to say from Henry and myself. I mean about our talking you back into Northamptonshire. My little Joe creature, do not stay at Portsmouth to lose your pretty looks. Those vile sea breezes are the ruin of beauty and health. Those vile sea breezes are the ruin of beauty and health. She's talking about the drink. Just kidding. My poor aunt always felt affected if within 10 miles of the sea, which the Admiral of course never believed, but I know it was so. I am at your service and Henry's at an hour's notice. I should like the scheme, and we would make a little circuit and show you Everingham in our way, and perhaps you would not mind passing through London and seeing the inside of St. George's, Hanover Square. Only keep your cousin Edmund from me at such a time. This is such a long letter. Okay. I should not like to be tempted. What a long letter. One more word. Henry, I find, has some idea of going into Norfolk again, upon some business that you approve. But this cannot possibly be permitted before the middle of next week. That is, he cannot anyhow be spared until after the 14th, for we have a party that evening. The value of a man like Henry on such an occasion is what you can have no conception of. So you must take it upon my word to be inestimable. He will see the Rushworths, which own I am not sorry for, having a little curiosity, and so I think he has, though he will not acknowledge it. And that's the end of the letter. This was a letter to be run thoroughly through eagerly, to be read deliberately, to supply matter for much reflection, and to leave everything in greater suspense than ever. Right. The only certainty to be drawn from it was that nothing decisive had yet taken place. Edmund had not yet spoken. How Miss Crawford really felt, how she meant to act, or might act, without or against her meaning, whether his importance to her were quite what it had been before the last separation, whether, if lessened, it were likely to lessen more, or to recover itself, were subjects for endless conjecture, and to be thought of on that day and many days to come, without producing any conclusion. The idea that returned the oftenest oftenest was that Miss Crawford, after proving herself cooled and staggered by a return to London habits, would yet prove herself in the end too much attached to him to give him up. She would try to be more ambitious than her heart would allow. She would hesitate, she would tease, she would condition, she would require a great deal, but she would finally accept. This was Fanny's most frequent expectation. A house in town that she thought must be impossible. Yet there was no saying what Miss Crawford might not ask. The prospect for her cousin grew worse and worse. The woman who could speak of him, and speak only of his appearance. What an unworthy attachment! To be deriving support from the commendations of Mrs. Fraser? She, who had known him intimately half a year. Fanny was ashamed of her. Those parts of her letter which related only to Mr. Crawford and herself touched her in comparison slightly. Whether Mr. Crawford went into Norfolk, before or after the 14th, was certainly no concern of hers, though everything considered, she thought he would go without delay. That Miss Crawford should endeavour to secure a meeting between him and Mrs. Rushworth was all in her worst line of conduct, and grossly unkind and ill-judged. But she hoped he would not be actuated by any such degrading curiosity. He acknowledged no such inducement, and his sister ought to have given him credit for better feelings than her own. She was yet more impatient for another letter from town after receiving this than she had been before, and for a few days was so unsettled by it altogether, by what had come and what might come, that her usual readings and conversations with Susan were much suspended. She could not command her attention as she wished. If Mr. Crawford remembered her message to her cousin, she thought it very likely, most likely, that he would write to her at all events. It would be most consistent with his usual kindness, until she got rid of this idea, till it gradually wore off, by no letters appearing in the course of 3 or 4 days more. She was in a most restless, anxious state. At length, a something like composure succeeded. She really does get a grip on herself easily, I feel like. To me. Suspense must be submitted to, and must be allowed to wear her out, and make her useless. Time did something, her own exertions something more, and she resumed her attentions to Susan, and again awakened the same interest in them. Susan was growing very fond of her, and though without any of the early delight in books, which had been so strong in Fanny, with a disposition much less inclined to sedentary pursuits, or to information or for information's sake, she had so strong a desire of not appearing ignorant, as with a good, clear understanding made her most attentive, profitable, thankful pupil. Fanny was her oracle. Fanny's explanations and remarks were a most important addition to every essay, or every chapter of history. What Fanny told her of former times dwelt more on her mind than the pages of Goldsmith, and she paid her sister the compliment of preferring her style to that of any printed author. The early habit of reading was wanting. Their conversations, however, were not always on subjects so high as history or morals. Others had their hour, and of lesser matters none returned so often or remained so long between them as Mansfield Park, a description of the people, the manners, the amusements, and the ways of Mansfield Park. Susan, who had an innate taste for the genteel and well-appointed, was eager to hear, and Fanny could not but indulge herself in dwelling on so beloved a theme. She hoped it was not wrong, though after a time Susan's very great admiration for everything said or done in her uncle's house, and earnest longing to go into Northamptonshire, seemed almost to blame her for exciting feelings which could not be gratified. Poor Susan was very little better fitted for home than her elder sister, and as Fanny grew thoroughly to understand this, she began to feel that when her own release from Portsmouth came, her happiness would have a material drawback in leaving Susan behind. Is she going to let Susan go to Mansfield Park and not go back? That a girl so capable of being made everything good should be left in such hands distressed her more and more. Was she likely to have a home to invite her to? What a blessing it would be. And had it been possible for her to return to Mr. Crawford's regard, the probability of his being very far from objecting to such a measure would have been the greatest increase of all her own comforts. She thought he was really good-tempered, and could fancy his entering into a plan of that sort most pleasantly. Whoa. Chapter 44. I can do this. Chapter 44. 7 weeks of the 2 months were very nearly gone, when the one letter, the letter from Edmund, so long expected, was put into Fanny's hands. As she opened and saw its length, she prepared herself for a minute detail of happiness and a profusion of love and praise towards the fortunate creature who was now mistress of his fate. These were the contents. My dear Fanny, excuse me that I have not written before. Crawford told me that you were wishing to hear from me, but I found it impossible to write from London, and persuaded myself that you would understand my silence. Could I have sent a few happy lines, they should not have been wanting. But nothing of that nature was ever in my power. I am returned to Mansfield in a less assured state than when I left it. My hopes are much weaker. You are probably aware of this already. So very fond of you as Miss Crawford is, it is most natural that she should tell you enough of her own feelings to furnish a tolerable guess at mine. I will not be prevented, however, from making my own communication. Our confidences in you need not clash. I ask no questions. There is something soothing in the idea that we have the same friend, and that whatever unhappy differences of opinion may exist between us, we are united in our love of you. It will be a comfort to me to tell you how things now are, and what are my present plans, if plans I can be said to have. I have been returned since Saturday. I was 3 weeks in London, and saw her, for London, very often. I had every attention from the Frasers that could be reasonably expected. I dare say I was not reasonable in carrying with me hopes of an intercourse at all like that of Mansfield. It was her manner, however, rather than an unfrequency of meeting. Had she been different when I did see her, I should have made no complaint, but from the very first she was altered. My first reception was so unlike what I had hoped, that I had almost resolved on leaving London again directly. I need not particularize. You know the weak side of her character, and may imagine the sentiments and expressions which were torturing me. She was in high spirits, and surrounded by those who were giving all the sport of their own bad sense to her too lively mind. I do not like Mrs. Fraser. She is a cold-hearted, vain woman who has married entirely from convenience, and though evidently unhappy in her marriage, places her disappointment not to faults of judgment or temper or disproportion of age, but to her being, after all, less affluent than many of her acquaintance, especially than her sister Lady Stornoway, and is the determined supporter of everything mercenary and ambitious, provided it be only mercenary and ambitious enough. I look upon her intimacy with those two sisters as the greatest misfortune of her life and mine. They have been leading her astray for years. Could she be detached from them? And sometimes I do not despair of it, for the affection appears to me principally on their side. They are fond of her, but I am sure she does not love them as she loves you. When I think of her great attachment to you, indeed, and the whole of her judicious, upright conduct as a sister, she appears a very different creature, capable of everything noble, and I am ready to blame myself for a too harsh construction of a playful manner. I cannot give her up, Fanny. She's the only woman in the world who I could ever think of as a wife. If I did not believe that she had some regard for me, of course I should not say this, but I do believe it. I am convinced that she is not without a decided preference. I have no jealousy of any individual. It is the influence of the fashionable world altogether that I am jealous of. It is the habits of wealth that I fear. Her ideas are not higher than her own fortune may warrant, but they are beyond what our incomes united could authorize. There is comfort, however, even here. I could better bear to lose her because not rich enough than because of my profession. That would only prove her affection not equal to sacrifices, which in fact I am scarcely justified in asking, and if I am refused, that I think will be the honest motive. Her prejudices I trust, are not so strong as they were. You have my thoughts exactly as they arise, my dear Fanny. Perhaps they are sometimes contradictory, but it will not be a less faithful picture of my mind. Having once begun, it is a pleasure to me to tell you all I feel. I cannot give her up. Connected as we already are, and I hope are to be. To give up Mary Crawford would be to give up the society of some of those most dear to me, to banish myself from the very house and friends whom, under any other distress, I should turn for consolation. The loss of Mary I must consider as comprehending the loss of Crawford and Fanny. Were it a decided thing, an actual refusal, I hope I should not know how to bear it, and how to endeavour to weaken her hold on my heart, and in the course of a few years— but I am writing nonsense. Were I refused, I must bear it. Until I am, I can never cease to try for her. This is the truth. The only question is how. What may the likeliest means? What may be the likeliest means? I have sometimes thought of going to London again after Easter, and sometimes resolved on doing nothing till she returns to Mansfield. Even now she speaks with pleasure of being in Mansfield in June, but June is at a great distance, and I believe I shall write her. I have nearly determined on explaining myself by letter. To be at an early certainty is a material object. My present state is miserably irksome. Considering everything, I think a letter will be decidedly the best method of explanation. I shall be able to write much that I could not say, and shall be giving her time for reflection before she resolves on her answer, and I am less afraid of the result of reflection than of an immediate hasty impulse. I think I am. My greatest danger would lie in her consulting Mrs. Fraser, and I at a distance unable to help my own cause. A letter exposes to all the evil of consultation, and where the mind is anything short of perfect decision, and an adviser may, in an unlucky moment, lead to do what it may afterwards regret. I must think this matter over a little. This long letter, full of my own concerns alone, will be enough to tie even the friendship of a Fanny. The last time I saw Crawford was at Mrs. Fraser's party. Fraser, Fraser. Fraser. I am more and more satisfied with all that I see and hear of him. There is not a shadow of wavering. He thoroughly knows his own mind and acts up to his resolutions. An inestimable quality. I could not see him and my eldest sister in the same room without recollecting what you once told me, and I acknowledge that they did not meet as friends. There was marked coolness on her side. They scarcely spoke. I saw him draw back, surprised, and I was sorry that Mrs. Rushworth should resent any form of supposed slight to Miss Bertram. You will wish to hear my opinion of Maria's degree of comfort as a wife. There is no appearance of unhappiness. I hope they get on pretty well together. I dined twice in Wimpole Street, and might have been there oftener, but it is mortifying to be with Rushworth as a brother. Julia seems to enjoy London exceedingly. I had little enjoyment there, but have less here. We are not a lively party. You are very much wanted. I miss you more than I can express. My mother desires her best love, and hopes to hear from you soon. She talks of you almost every hour, and I am sorry to find how many weeks more she is likely to be without you. My father means to fetch you himself, but it will not be till after Easter. He has business in town. You are happy at Portsmouth, I hope, but this must not be a yearly visit. I want you at home, that I may have your opinion about Thornton Lacey. I have little heart for extensive improvements, till I know that I will never have a mistress. I think I shall certainly write. It is quite settled that the Grants go to Bath. They leave Mansfield on Monday. I am glad of it. I am not comfortable enough to be fit for anybody, but your aunt seems to feel out of luck that such an article of Mansfield news should fall to my pen instead of hers. Yours ever, my dearest Fanny. I will never— No, I never will. No, I certainly never will wish for a letter again, was Fanny's secret declaration as she finished it. What do they bring but disappointment and sorrow? Not till after Easter. How shall I bear it? And my poor aunt talking of me every hour. Fanny checked the tendencies of these thoughts as well as she could, but she was within half a minute of starting the idea that Sir Thomas was quite unkind both to her aunt and herself. As for the main subject of the letter, there was nothing in that to soothe irritation. She was almost vexed into displeasure and anger against Edmund. "There is no good in this delay," said she. "Why is it not settled? He is blinded, and nothing will open his eyes. Nothing can, after having had truths before him so long in vain. He will marry her, and be poor and miserable. God grant that her influence do not make him cease to be respectable." She looked over the letter again. "So very fond of me! 'Tis nonsense all. She loves nobody but herself and a brother. Her friends leading her astray for years? She is quite as likely to have led them astray. They have all perhaps been corrupting one another. But if they are so much fonder of her than she is of them, she is the less likely to have been hurt, except by their flattery. The only woman in the world whom he could ever think of as a wife, I firmly believe it. It is an attachment to govern his whole life. Accepted or refused, his heart is wedded to her forever. The loss of Mary I must consider as comprehending the loss of Crawford and Fanny. Edmund, you do not know me. The families would never be connected if you do not connect them." "Oh, right, right. Finish it at once. Let there be an end of the suspense. Fix, commit, condemn yourself." Such sensations, however, were too near akin to resentment to be long guiding Fanny's soliloquies. She was soon more softened and sorrowful. His warm regard, his kind expressions, his confidential treatment touched her strongly. He was only too good to everybody. It was a letter, in short, which she would not but have had for the world, and which could never be valued enough. This was the end of it. Everybody at all addicted to letter writing. Everybody at all addicted to letter writing without having much to say, which will include a large proportion of the female word at least, must feel with Lady Bertram that she was out of luck in having such a capital piece of Mansfield news as the certainty of the Grants going to Bath occur at a time when she could make no advantage of it, and will admit that it must have been very mortifying to her to see it fall to the share of her thankless son, and treat it as concisely as possible at the end of a long letter, instead of having it to spread over the largest part of a page of her own. Everybody at all addicted to letter writing. That's funny. For though Lady Bertram rather shone in the epistolary line, having early in her marriage, from the want of other employment, and the circumstance of Sir Thomas's being in Parliament, got into the way of making and keeping correspondence, and formed herself a very creditable, commonplace, amplifying style, so that a very little matter was enough for her. She could not do entirely without any. She must have something to write about, even to her niece, and being so soon to lose all the benefit of Dr. Grant's gouty symptoms, and Mrs. Grant's morning calls, it was very hard upon her to be deprived of one of the last epistolary uses she could put to them. There was a rich amends, however, preparing for her. Lady Bertram's hour of good luck came. Within a few days from the receipt of Edmund's letter, Fanny had one from her aunt, beginning thus: "My dear Fanny, I take up my pen to communicate some very alarming intelligence, which I make no doubt will give you much concern." Oh, no. This was a great deal better to have than to have to take up the pen to acquaint her with all the particulars of the Grants and the journey, for the present intelligence was of a nature to promise occupation for the pen for many days to come, being no less than the dangerous illness of her eldest son, of which they had received notice by express a few hours before. Tom had gone from London with a party of young men to Newmarket, where a neglectful fall and a good deal of drinking had brought on a fever, and when the party broke up, being unable to move, had been left by himself at the house of one of these young men, to the comforts of sickness and solitude, and the attendance only of servants. Instead of being soon well enough to follow his friends, as he had hoped, his disorder increased considerably, and it was not long before he thought so ill of himself as to be as ready as his physician to have a letter dispatched to Mansfield. "This is distressing intelligence, as you may suppose," observed her ladyship, after giving the substance of it. has agitated us exceedingly, and we cannot prevent ourselves from being greatly alarmed and apprehensive for the poor invalid, whose state Sir Thomas fears may be very critical. And Edmund kindly proposes attending his brother immediately, but I am happy to add that Sir Thomas will not leave me on this distressing occasion, as it would be too trying for me. We shall greatly miss Edmund in our small circle, but I trust and hope he will find the poor invalid in a less alarming state than might be apprehended, and that he will be able to bring him to Mansfield shortly, which Sir Thomas proposes should be done, and thinks best on every account, and I flatter myself the poor sufferer will soon be able to bear the removal without material inconvenience or injury. As I have little doubt of your feeling for us, my dear Fanny, under these distressing circumstances, I will write again very soon. Yikes, so Tom Bertram is injured and ill. What if he dies and then, oh my god, and then Edmund becomes like the Sir Edmund Bertram? Whoa. Fanny's feelings on the occasion were indeed considerably more warm and genuine than her aunt's style of writing. She felt truly for them all. Tom dangerously ill, Edmund gone to attend him, and the sadly small party remaining at Mansfield were cares to shut out every other care, or almost every other. She could just find selfishness enough to wonder whether Edmund had written to Miss Crawford before this summons came, but no sentiment dwelt long with her that was not purely affectionate and disinterestedly anxious. Her aunt did not neglect her. She wrote again and again. They were receiving frequent accounts from Edmund, and these accounts were as regularly transmitted to Fanny in the same diffuse style and the same medley of trusts, hopes, and fears, all following and producing each other at haphazard. I feel like they never included her this much when she lived there, and now they're like really, really including her. This is wild. It was a sort of playing at being frightened. The sufferings which Lady Bertram did not see had little power over her fancy, and she wrote very comfortably about agitation and anxiety and poor invalids, till Tom was actually conveyed to Mansfield, and her own eyes had beheld his altered appearance. Then a letter which she had been previously preparing for Fanny was finished in a different style, in the language of real feeling and alarm. Then she wrote as she might have spoken. "He is just come, my dear Fanny, and he is taken upstairs, and I am so shocked to see him that I do not know what to do. I am sure he has been very ill, poor Tom. I am quite grieved for him, and very much frightened, and so is Sir Thomas, and how glad I should be if you were here to comfort me, but Sir Thomas hopes he will be better tomorrow, and says we must consider his journey." People writing how they speak. That's fun. The real solicitude now awakened in the maternal bosom was not soon over. Tom's extreme impatience to be removed to Mansfield and experience those comforts of home and family which had been little thought of in uninterrupted health, and probably induced his being conveyed thither too early, as a return of fever came on, and for a week he was in a more alarming state than ever. They were all very seriously frightened. Lady Bertram wrote her daily terrors to her niece, who might now be said to live upon letters, and pass all her time between suffering from that of today and looking forward to tomorrow's. Without any particular affection for her eldest cousin, her tenderness of heart made her feel that she could not spare him, and the purity of her principles added yet a keener solicitude when she considered how little useful, how little self-denying his life had apparently been. Susan was her only companion and listener on this, as on more common occasions. Susan was always ready to hear and to sympathize. Nobody else could be interested in so remote an evil as illness in a family above 100 miles off, not even Mrs. Price, beyond a brief question or two, if she saw her daughter with a letter in her hand, and now and then the quiet observation of, "My poor sister Bertram must be in a great deal of trouble." So long divided and so differently situated, the ties of blood were little more than nothing. An attachment originally as tranquil as their tempers was now become a mere name. Mrs. Price did quite as much for Lady Bertram as Lady Bertram would have done for Mrs. Price. 3 or 4 prices might have been swept away, or any or all except Fanny and William, and Lady Bertram would have thought little about it. Or perhaps might have caught from Mrs. Norris's lips the cant of its being a very happy thing and a great blessing to their poor dear sister Price to have them so well provided for. Wow. Tom, huh? He's just only experienced the comfort of homes and the uninterrupted health, and now he's realizing how fortunate he's been. And kind of so is Fanny, right? Fanny's kind of, everybody's like learning lessons. Wow. Exciting to read 2 chapters in one sitting. They're getting smaller as we get toward the end. Wow, what a turn of events. There's literally like not that many chapters left and somebody's like sick and dying. This is such a curveball. What's gonna happen? It's crazy to read out loud a book that I don't know anything about. Like, I knew what was gonna happen in Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice, and I don't know anything about this book, and it's kind of suspenseful and crazy. I think I have to stop reading today. And I'm going to pick it up tomorrow, and I mean, not hopefully we'll finish, but maybe we'll finish tomorrow. Oh my God. Okay, everybody, happy reading, and ta-ta.